Hi and welcome to another Huddle Breakdown Extra Time. I'm your host Martin Murphy and I'm joined as ever by James, but sadly no Alan this week. Alan's not been feeling great and he's unable to join us today, but certainly we wish you all the best, Alan, and look forward to seeing you again next week. James.
I don't believe it. I think he was out partying last night in Bergamo, and he didn't tell anybody. That's my theory on what's going on. But yeah, we hope Alan feels better quickly, and I'm sure he'll be back in the saddle next week.
I actually wondered if it might have been a sore back with all the back slapping after Tuesday's episode. If you didn't catch it, my friends, please go back and watch it. I'm sure most of you have, but Alan was in absolutely excellent form. He was talking about our rivals over the city and telling some home truths, really, and well worth a look if you'd like to go back and watch that. So again, Alan, I hope you're feeling better. We are going to be joined later by Greg Marshall, who's a Motherwell fan and fellow data enthusiast. Well worth a listen. We pre-recorded that before the show, so do please stick with us for that as well. We're going to start off, of course, James, with a European result to get us smiling. 0-0 draw in Atalanta in Bergamo last night. And I have to say, James, you called it, my friend. I was kind of fearing the worst, I have to say. But you, with your numbers, your reason, your talk of XGs of 2 and so forth, you know. So fair play to you, my friend.
Well, that segues me to what I need to do, which is apologize, because not only to our audience, but to Alan, because he put out a tweet that mischaracterized something unintentionally, which was, I'm living one day at a time right now. I don't remember. You remember Wilson Phillips? You remember that group?
Yes.
Right? Somebody. I'm not going to sing it, but hold on for one more day. Right. So right now I'm holding on for one more day every day. And I was lazy in looking up the wage bill situation with Atalanta. And I used this AI thing called Perplexity that's supposed to be replacing Google search. And then I went to an Italian website that confirmed that bad information. And that's how we got to where we are now, where I'm apologizing to the audience and to Alan on the statement that I made on Tuesday about Atalanta's wage bill being lower than ours. That's not the case. And it had been the case up until probably this past season. But irregardless, that doesn't mean it was true. So that was wrong. But the underlying analysis was not really affected by that. That was almost like a throwaway line, if I'm honest, tongue in cheek, which was they're in a neighborhood of us, right? So they've got advantages. They're playing in Serie A. They've got more money than we do on a wage bill basis, but they're not disconnected from us, right? They're in our kind of peer group, as I like to call it. And that was really what I was trying to get at, that this, as crazy as the optimism was heading into Dortmund was, in my view, the cynicism and the kind of dire outlook heading into Bergamo, I thought didn't reflect where they are. And they're good. Like I'm not trying to mischaracterize them as anything other than a well-run club and a good team, but they're not in that like, oh my God, I'm going to wet my pants stratosphere that I felt like there was this mood going in, because understandably the recency bias of getting destroyed in Dortmund, that people were like worried about another PSG, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, 5-0, 7-0 kind of horsing. And I didn't think that was a likely outcome. We'll get into it, but I as heck didn't expect it to unfold the way it did. And this is actually a fascinating game to analyze once we get beyond the sheer delight from a supporter's perspective of the result, because the result was magnificent. That's objectively true, I think. And I think most people are delighted with it, as am I. And the ramifications, what it means for the group, not the group, but the league now, we have to say, and the outlook for Celtic in that context. But there's a lot of nuance to get in here on the data side, on the performance side. So, yeah. How did you engage in the game? Like
Yeah,
were you in Bergamo and flew back? What happened?
oh, if only my godson was over there and sent me back some photographs, and that was wonderful to see. He has been to many European matches away from home, and there's been very few happy occasions at the actual stadium. I think he's enjoyed himself more outside of the games. No, I have to say. Really interesting game. Again, looking at the numbers and so forth, as you talked about. But to answer your question, I was feeling reasonably relaxed when I saw the way that Brendan Rodgers had set Celtic up and some of the tweaks that he had made and the changes compared to the game in Germany. I felt a little bit more relaxed. The concerns that I had before the game, some of the stuff down the flanks, which did come to pass in the first half, coming from the left, an awful lot of crosses coming in, but also felt that with so many bodies in the box, it was almost like, right, well, let's make sure that we're central, that we defend the box, that we've got plenty of people in there. And guess what? We've got a couple of guys, as it turns out, that are really good at heading the ball. So that seemed to be a bit of a strategy. And then in the second half, that supply didn't really pay off for them. There was very few crosses come in like they did in the first half. But I think what surprised me was towards the end of the game, and I'm probably saying about the last 20 minutes, last 15 minutes, I thought that Atalanta seemed to kind of panic a little bit as the game was progressing. I couldn't believe some of the substitutions, because one of the fears that I did have at half time, I thought, well, look, given the levels of concentration, given the levels of fitness, that these defenders especially, but right across the board, midfield and so forth, tracking runners, being aware of everything around them, thought eventually as the game wears on, that could see a sucker punch near the end. So I was actually quite surprised to see kind of their two star forwards being substituted. It was almost like, well, let's try this. So I felt reasonably relaxed. Other than, I don't think I've told you this before, James, but the first season that I can really remember watching Celtic was 77-78, when we finished 5th out of 10 and didn't qualify for Europe. That then was followed by Ali's Tartan Army's expedition to Argentina and the impact that had on my young psyche. So I think I'm quite prone to fearing the worst, to be quite honest. I've been buffeted in life, my friend. And so there was that kind of free kick right at the death, and I thought, oh no, it's hit the wall, brilliant. Oh, hang on a minute, here's another one in a slightly better position. So, so there's always that kind of fear of a sucker punch right at the end, because we've had it so often in Europe over the years. But no, absolutely delighted, very proud actually. I think Brendan Rodgers did a fantastic job tactically. I thought the players did a superb job, brave on it, as I mentioned earlier, the concentration, the discipline. I was delighted by it overall, really. Don't know if you'd like to get into some of the interesting data and so forth that you came across.
Yeah, so I was so, when I started to kind of dig into the game and my routine that I go through to analyze games, some of it was so fascinating that, again, only fascinating to nerds like me, is that it got me starting to write an article about it, or a post about it for the Substack. So I'll put that out probably tomorrow. So all of this stuff is fresh in my mind, and digging through kind of historical benchmarks and looking at aspects of other games. And so what I'm going to start with is objective information. That's not my opinion. And then I'm going to go into the opinion part of it. What my analysis of how things transpired. And that's going to include plenty of speculation. So I want to say that up front. But objectively speaking, the game was very similar from a kind of proximity to each team's box, disrupting the other team's flow as far as ball progression with games that we lose 6-0. Okay. So if you go back throughout the history, like the amount of times that they had the ball in our box or entered our box, it was not dissimilar to, the PSG. Actually, was worse in ways than some of those games. So, and if you look at the XG differential, again, depending on the platform, you're looking at about a +2 XG in their favor. So in some ways, this was the bizarro world version of Dortmund, in the sense that we talked about after the Dortmund game that, oh my God, it could have been a lot worse had they made a lot of good decisions in our defensive third. And that a lot of it was just great finishing and some luck with, the deflection from Adeyemi, that kind of thing. And 2 penalties. I mean, obviously. This game was kind of the inverse of that, in the sense that, particularly in the first half, they hit the crossbar. They had some other chance. They had a lot of decent chances. But we always go back to this issue of the variance of high balls, cross balls, and that, we talked about this on Tuesday as it related to the Aberdeen game, and how, when you're whipping in crosses and a ton of crosses, that introduces some variance. And so we enjoyed some positive luck here, the opposite of Dortmund, where their decision-making was still bad, kind of like Dortmund. They didn't have the greatest kind of final third decision-making, and they were whipping in just an ungodly amount of crosses. And I'll share a number. So one of the stats that Y-Scout tracks is clearances, and I'll link to it in my article with the glossary, how they specifically define it. But their data had it at 38 clearances that we had out of our box. And that is there's nothing even really close recently. And you have to go back again to those games where we're playing freaking Lionel Messi, Barcelona. Like, that's the level of them threatening our box. So when people say it was a great performance, I don't think that's true objectively. I think we did a good job keeping it close enough that some positive luck finally went our way away in Europe. And we had some heroic individual performances. I mean, Trusty and Scales just, doing objectively a good job in defending the box. So that's subjectively how I would kind of characterize the game, was that, the vast majority of the time, we talked about on Tuesday, the vast majority of the time we win that game. Like, if you play that game 100 times, Celtic wins 99 times. I think if we play that game yesterday 100 times, we probably lose it 85 times.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or 90 times. So it was one of not as extreme as an outlier as the Aberdeen game, but in that, again, talking about neighborhoods earlier, in that neighborhood. So that's kind of the measurable, quantifiable. I think what happened is, and how am I going to pursue? So I think the Brendan Rodgers that we heard post Dortmund was not the most candid Brendan Rodgers. So how much of that was attributable to defensiveness and ego, and how much of it was to try and gaslight Gasparina in preparation for this Atalanta game? Who knows? Like, that's impossible to say. My guess is probably some of both. But he did not set up to play his style of play, as he wasn't Ange. So we didn't set up that way to, go berserk like we did at Dortmund and pressing high. Having said that, I also don't think we set up to park the bus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think so I think what happened was, I think we set up to do more of a mid-block, more compact, tighten the lines up, and with the game plan of using Adam Ida as an outball. And I think that went horribly wrong. And as a result, we couldn't get out of our own end increasingly as the first half. And I'll go through this in my article, kind of documenting some of the stuff that Y-Scout puts out on a timeline basis that reflects some of this. So like our average defensive position, for example, in the first 15 minutes of the game was actually fairly advanced. But that was also when they were creating a lot of their good chances.
Yes.
And as the half progressed, we were getting pinned back more and more. And I think my guess is, and again, this is the speculation part, I think at halftime they may have made an adjustment and said, okay, this is going to happen anyway. Let's optimize for bunkering. Like, we're going to park the bus here and like we're just going to deflect the shelling. Because in the second half, it was for the most part, parking the bus until Kyogo came on. And then there was a little bit that he introduced. So I that's kind of how I think it played out, based off of the numbers, having watched the game, obviously, and revisited some of this. So I don't think it was some tactical master plan that won the game. I think we made some good tweaks intra-game. I actually think that the plan to have Ida as an outball was a bad idea. And I think we would have been better off probably with Kyogo starting, within the context of the game plan of having more of a mid-block and try to hit them on a counter-attack basis. Because if you look, until Kyogo came on, I mean, there was no counter-attacking. I mean, again, they were flogging our half for the most part. There was very little where we were doing any kind of productive build-up, transitioning, and counter-attacking. It's some sporadic stuff here, with Kuhn and Maeda. And this will go back to, and I'll shut up here after my monologue here, is I think this game also reflected the importance of levels of speed, where their two wingbacks are fast enough that our wingbacks are probably comparable, if not maybe a notch slower even. Like Bellanova, in particular, is a fast dude. He's not all that skilled on the ball, but he sure is fast.
Yep.
And when you face him up against Maeda, he might even be a step faster than Maeda.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Maeda, the moves that he usually just blows past people and kicks the ball past them and then whips in crosses, like he had a harder time against Bellanova doing that kind of thing. So I think we really struggle with their man marking. I think a lot of the deficiencies that I've been talking about relative to our quality on the ball in midfield, even with Engels and, being able to build up at this level, I think we really struggled against their system. And I think that's why we had to park the bus. I don't think that was the game plan. I think we ended up transitioning into that because we basically couldn't do anything else. That's kind of how I saw it.
I think that point that you're making valid, but by the same token, we had to park the bus in Germany and didn't, and kept playing the exact same way. So it showed a little bit more maturity, and it showed a little bit of flexibility as well. And
100%.
Brendan Rodgers talked about, he had that little swipe, pragmatic enough for you at the end, and
that was the ego part.
Yes.
That was not the gaslighting part. That was the ego part. Yeah.
A couple of the aspects that, I picked up on as well, in terms of the way I was feeling watching it. I felt pretty comfortable, as I mentioned, when we were sitting back. I started getting a little bit more twitchy, those kind of Pink Panther movies with Herbert Lom, the eye going and things. Once we started attacking, and we gave the ball away a few times, and we were caught out of position, and I thought, oh man, with their pace, we could easily get caught. And that's kind of what happened, which gave away the free kick right at the end, where Scales had to bring the guy down for the free kick. In terms of Adam Ida, he could have held the ball up a bit better, but I have to say, I thought he really put in a shift. He really worked the centre halves.
Everybody did.
Everybody did. There were certainly no failures, right across, but I felt Ida as well. It probably helped Kyogo a little bit because those centre halves knew they had been in a game. So Kyogo came on fresh and he gave them something else to think about. Another one that really stood out for me with Adam Ida was at one stage he was kind of defending pretty much in the left back position and then broke forward and then was joining the attack. And I thought, wow, so he really played his part. But I agree, in terms of the game plan and putting balls forward and trying to get up the pitch, didn't really work as much as we may have hoped there. Right across the board, though, I thought some of the partnerships, you look at the way Kuhn and AJ played down that right. Kuhn, I thought, kind of sacrificed his normal game, was really working his socks off to get back. Showed some ability going forward as well. By the end, he was absolutely, so many of them were absolutely exhausted, probably mentally and physically. One thing that I was also pleased at was that the guys that came on didn't look out of place, and I felt that the substitutes worked, that it also gave them, guys like McCowan, that bit of experience. I think he'd one misplaced pass, but he worked really hard and he looked valuable with his energy moving forward. There were so many performances right across the board. Before I come to that and ask your opinion a little bit there as well, James, some of the, stats, some of the numbers that I came across as well, we're automatically drawn to Dortmund, aren't we? It's like a perverse Casablanca will always have Dortmund, But you're looking at, what was it, 22 shots on goal from Atalanta, 6 of those on target. 66% possession, but also with the shots, you did these over 20 shots, over 50 touches in the opposition box. Now, I discovered that in the history of the Champions League, those sort of numbers have only come up with a 0-0 on one other occasion in the whole history of the Champions League, which was PSG versus Dortmund, our old friends
Ironically,
again,
right?
in the semi-final. Yeah, which was remarkable. Without question, you have to ride your luck a bit, and by goodness, I think we've deserved it. We've had so many games over
100%.
these years, and we've had no luck whatsoever. And I think they deserved any luck that they had. And when you look at it, though, we're limited. It was 6 shots on target out of these 22 shots. They were shooting from distance. The crosses that they were firing, and they came to... was it Pasalic that, seemed to get them into everything, putting them over the bar, hit the bar. So the way we defended kind of forced them into that a little bit as well. And at the end of the day, look, 0-0 away from home in Europe. Again, I looked at this and not that common for us. We go back to Anderlecht away under Brendan when we won 3-0 before. Yep. So there's been 18 games played in that 7-year period and 51 goals against in that, terrifying. Yep. So what a performance to go away from home against the top goal scorers in Serie A.
Yep.
And their main men, their main goal scorer and their main providers are getting substituted through frustration. And if I could come to you a little bit, because what we were talking about after the Dortmund game, including Alan, we were all saying we felt that Trusty had been dealt a little bit harshly in social media by many in the fan base. And goodness me, I think a few people are coming round to seeing what this guy's actually capable of.
Absolutely. And so again, think about this from the context of the type of game that it ended up being. And it played to his strengths.
Yeah.
So what I've written about and talked about with Trusty, and again, in fairness to him, he's not a right-sided center back, so he's playing out of position, a position he's rarely ever played.
Yes.
Let alone playing on a team like Celtic domestically, where we're the dominant ball possession, and he's supposed to be Beckenbauer theoretically, right? So it's unfair to him to expect him to walk into that situation in a new club and just automatically, like, even if he's capable from a skills perspective, one could reasonably expect a period of transition. This game aligned more so for what he's pretty good at, given his track record. You know, being a defender in the English Championship, for example, you're going to face a few crosses and you're going to have to defend your box. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, so basically him and Scales, I would argue, defending their box, which we don't do very often domestically, stood out. And that comes back to this issue of the dichotomy of demands, the challenges that are inherent to Celtic from a recruitment perspective and a style of play perspective, which is how do you optimize for domestic and Europe when they are worlds apart as far as what the reality is you're going to encounter. So it's not an easy task to try and navigate. But yes, he thrived, and I'll go back to what you said as far as, so I don't want my comments to be misconstrued in the sense that I'm being critical. You know, I didn't like the Ida selection. I didn't like that. But, and then there's a whole nother thing on that. I'll talk about at some other time about hold up play and strikers. I think that's one of these Moneyball concepts that's dated in football, that actually it's a negative expected value strategy. Unless you're Guriasi, like there are some strikers that can do it and are very good at it, but your median or average striker, it's not a good idea from what I can tell. Having said that, the adjustments that were made and the execution of parking the bus were sublime. They were tremendous. So the credit is deserved for making the tweaks that were made, and then the play that was executed by the players was magnificent. I just wanted to point out that I don't think it was the game plan, right? And so I don't think the initial game plan was necessarily very good, and credit goes to pivoting. And to your point, that didn't happen at Dortmund. So I'd rather have it go that way than, you know, stubborn and, you know, get annihilated with not having the flexibility. But again, let me just put this in, because I think that so those are all positives. I think some other negatives that I end up coming away with is I think it's another kind of contextual, because going back to this idea that Atalanta are not PSG or Messi, you know, Barcelona, even though the guts of this game were more similar to that kind of game than, you know, that Anderlecht match, for example, or, you know, so I'll give you some of the benchmark, and it's going to be in my article. So if you go back to the 1-1 game at Manchester City during Brendan's first tenure, okay, they had 17 entries into our box and had 16 touches in our box. Okay. So again, back to some of the type of stats that you referenced earlier. Again, this is according to Y-Scout, so this is apples to apples on methodology. Atalanta had 63 entries into our box and 44 touches in our box. So those are not on the same planet. You have to get into, like, again, I went back from the beginning of the 15-16 season and looked at all of our European games. So not just where we took a beating, but when we gave beatings out. Okay. And what did it look like when we were hammering a team with possession and, you know, basically just bombarding their box with control of the game. And so, for example, I think it was the Icelandic team, KR, in 2021. We had 42 entries into their box, 39 touches in their box. Nome Kalju, where we won 5-0, 46 and 34. Linfield, back in Brendan's first tenure. Again, these are usually those early, you know, Champions League qualifiers that we used to suffer through. 57 and 44. So, you know, the Barcelona game, 7-0, 41 entries, 36 touches in the box. So, you know, we're in that neighborhood with the way that the game played out. So I would argue that that's a testament to two things. One, that the initial game plan didn't work, because I don't think Brendan wanted to park the bus. And secondly, is we go back to recruitment, is the fact that we can't build out against a team like Atalanta, and they end up suffocating us to the point where we have to park the bus, I think speaks to the issues the summer window, and the aggregate buildup of problems with recruitment relative to our style of play, even in the European context, and being able to, even play a mid block and not getting pressured into bunkering like this by a team of Atalanta's level. That to me is a relative negative to take out of how the game transpired. That's all performance. That's all future. I don't think we'll necessarily face another team like this kind of situation again until Aston Villa, probably.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, although
Yeah,
it'll be interesting. Obviously we'll look at the Leipzig game coming up. In a future episode, and very different type of team and so forth, and posing different dangers. But yeah, I was thinking of Villa as well, and hopefully they'll play their fourth choice team because they've qualified so easily by the time we play them.
Yeah, I joked in the chat room that we have with the Substack that we do during the games. Now I joked that as the game was progressing, I said my biggest worry is that Atalanta just decides to give us the ball, and kind of draw us out and then try to counter us.
Yeah,
and because I think we have some issues there in transition. I
kind of alluded to that earlier. That was the only time I kind of started getting a little bit twitchy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because I was agree with you, but by 5 minutes into the second half, it's like I think we could play all day and they won't score.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was one of those kind of games that we get on the flip side of that at times domestically when it's just one of those days at Kilmarnock where you're like, holy crap, how many more crosses are we going to whip in there and not score? So it had that feel to it. But yes, I again, glorious result, overdue for some positive variance and luck. But I also don't think it's, emblematic of some major shift in the dynamics that we're facing in Europe. And I still am concerned about how our recruitment's going to manifest even when we play Club Brugge, because Bruges is probably going to set up to counter us. Right. So again, we start looking at how some Zagreb, maybe even it'll be in at their stadium that they'll probably set up similarly. So that's going to introduce whole different risks and situations. So this goes back to these different types of risks that we face, given kind of the imperfection of our squad composition.
I'd like to pick up on that a little bit, actually, James. Just to mention as well, of course, last season we got 4 points. We're sitting on 4 points already, and there's 5 games still to go. I do agree with you. I think that the Bruges game's going to be absolutely crucial to where we end up, and the Zagreb game away from home is going to be really interesting in terms of how Brendan sees that. But to kind of consider the recruitment that you mentioned there, obviously, we've talked about Trusty and Scales actually now beginning to form a partnership. It was in a very embryonic stage, and they came through, I felt, with flying colours. Scales has been playing pretty well, as we discussed before. 1 or 2 little errors, but a couple of magnificent clearances with those guys, with balls getting cut across into the 6-yard box and just behind them and so forth. Really almost goal saving. AJ had pretty much a goal-saving tackle on Lookman as well, didn't he? Just before half-time. But I wondered what you thought about a couple of the younger players, because in the market that we're involved in, we're spending money on end goals. You've got young Baye coming in from Barcelona. I thought Baye, I was quite impressed, given the pace that was coming down the right-hand side, aided by Maeda. I thought he kind of snuffed the danger out there. In fact, the I forget the chap's
Villanova.
name. Yes, he gets
Villanova,
substituted
yep.
later on
Yep.
in the game as well. And I had previously looked at him and thought, oh, he could be a real threat the way he's
Yep.
bombing up and down, and also with his height. So I think fair play to Baye. And he was one of our shots on target as well, wasn't he? You know, he burst forward and let it rip. It took the slight deflection, and the goalkeeper managed to get it over. Engels was the other shot on target as well in the first half, shot from a bit of distance as well, and put in some really good deliveries, you know, from corners, and mainly from the corners, I think, and also longer free kicks. What was your opinion on those two in terms of the performances?
Yeah, so I thought so. The profile issues with Vale, when I looked at him when we signed him, were he doesn't have good pace, but you know, within the context again of
Yeah,
a fullback in Europe, and then he's incredibly one-footed, and he can be a little bit sloppy with, ironically, his short passing. So he's got some creativity to him, but you
yeah,
know, in
that
build
happened,
up,
didn't it? Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So I think again, I think this was he benefited from how the game transitioned, where he wasn't defending in a lot of space. He wasn't being left out on an island, you know, 50 yards from goal, going 1v1 versus Bellanova. He was, you know, maybe 20 yards with a little bit of help inside, right? So this is where the
yeah,
defensive structure and the organization, I think, really helped our individual players defend better. So not only as a unit then, but individually, it made their jobs more comfortable within the skill sets that they have. Engels was terrific. Like
yeah,
his defending, and again, you know, he was a 19 and 20-year-old defensive midfielder at Augsburg defending in the Bundesliga. Well, guess what they did a lot of, right? Is exactly what he just did yesterday. So that skill set he has, and he's very good at it, or he can be very good at it. And I thought he was very good in that facet of play yesterday. What he wasn't great at was with his back to the defense, someone man marking him, getting into space, taking possession in close space, turning and progressing the ball, either beating his man through a 1v1 or making a forward pass. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
he struggled with that. And I'm not surprised he's struggling at that based off of what I've looked at in his track record. So again, this goes back to this issue of putting players in positions to succeed or fail, relative strengths or weaknesses, development, and you know, the ability to put together a game plan that uh, benefits players more with their strengths than exposing their weaknesses. And so that's where I think, you know, going into the game, the way we set up probably didn't set out to amplify strengths of our players. And as that started to manifest, we did switch, and that was great. But I think a lot of things, you know, when the game was more stretched in that first 15,
Yeah,
20 minutes, there was a lot of holy crap. Like there was a lot of
yeah,
PTSD there. Like, so this is going to turn out bad, right? And then we got our crap together, and that was good. But yeah, a lot of those weaknesses for Engels and Valle, my enunciation, as you'll hear with Greg in a little bit here, with all these horrible Motherwell names that they have,
these
these
Greek forwards.
multinational, these fancy multinational Scottish clubs with their recruitment from all over the world. But yeah, so there are absolute strengths with these players. It's a question of what they are and where the weaknesses are, and how each of those, you know, get amplified or exposed. So yeah, they defended the space that they had to defend in, let's say, the last 70 minutes of the game brilliantly.
Yeah,
But this goes back to how many times are we going to get 63 bombardments into our box in any given season? It's like almost never. Even
well,
in the
remember,
Champions
we're
League,
going to
even
Fir
in the Champions.
Park at the weekend.
Well, not that many though. So that's the thing. They might get
Maybe not so many, but you know.
they might have 10 of those,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
as we'll talk about with Greg, with set pieces
yeah,
and that kind of stuff. So on a narrow basis, they can absolutely. But even within the European context, I mean, Barcelona wasn't whipping crosses in like that. Like
yeah,
this was just this kind of, when we talked about this on Tuesday, looking forward to Atalanta and how they do have a very specific way that they play with the man marking and the wide overloads that they do, and then the crossing in. And again, to our credit, to the players, not our credit, the players' credit, and to the coaching staff's credit, is we did largely restrict them from the cutback type crosses that they're kind of known for. So they weren't getting into the byline. They weren't getting into those kind of deep within 12-yard period areas of the pitch, particularly once we got settled defensively. So we did undermine how they oftentimes create chances. But yeah, so again, fascinating game to analyze. I'll lay out more of the spreadsheet shagging data specifics on the benchmarking that I did for viewers and readers, hopefully by the end of the week. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how all this kind of manifests and extrapolates through the rest of this league phase of the Champions League, because each team's going to have fascinating chess pieces to play as far as setup and so yeah, that to me the biggest news is that we made changes and they worked.
Yeah.
That really was the positive that I take out of the game.
Just final observations from me, and one thing that I'll just ask your opinion on before we move on a little bit, James. But before the game, one of the concerns I had, because I did keep having these
PTSD
flashbacks, yeah, pretty much, yeah. And I was really concerned about Ederson in the midfield. Having watched him, I thought looked a marvellous footballer, and I was a bit concerned about the gaps that could have appeared, in which we saw and all too obvious evidence in Germany, and the gaps weren't there after, as you talk about, that period of time, first 15 minutes or so. We got tight. I thought I had concerns about how Callum McGregor was going to cope with it. I was very reassured the way the midfield played overall. Also, thought it was interesting with Hatate. He gave away possession a couple of times, but he was a great possibility for that through ball, just to get us up the pitch there. And I agree with what you were talking about before, where kind of like to see him play with Engels as opposed to Bernardo and Engels maybe playing together in a lot of ways as well. Just the kind of final thought, haven't mentioned Kasper Schmeichel, and let's be fair here. After shipping 7 goals, the embarrassment factor that guy must have felt, especially with his father watching over in the Westfalenstadion. I thought he exuded confidence. The defence benefited so much with his experience there. Very assured. Let's not forget the conditions were appalling as well. Really wet, greasy conditions for a goalkeeper. His handling was superb. But I also thought that apart from one instance, the way he was playing the ball out, and he was going long on occasions, but very accurately to get us up the pitch. And I know that you've got a great interest in goalkeepers. What did you think of Kasper's performance?
Solid. That's he made the saves he was supposed to make, and he made one that was a little tougher. I wouldn't say like outrageously good, but that's. This goes back to attribution and breaking down performances. So one of, and how narratives come out of games that don't necessarily reflect what happened. So the loss at Barcelona, the infamous loss that we've mentioned under Brendan's first tenure, oftentimes gets assigned to, he was pragmatic, he parked the bus, he got horsed 7-0. Blah, blah, blah. And he took a lot of criticism at that point because he did that. And what oftentimes gets overlooked was that we had horrible goalkeeping play that game. I can't even remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he was the guy who's supposed to play with his feet that Brendan brought in, who made Barkas look like a world-class shot stopper in that game. And he was horrible. So yes, it was Barcelona, but actually Barcelona didn't create a huge amount of chances in that game. We actually did do a pretty good job stifling them on a relative basis, given who we were facing. Peak later stages of peak Barcelona and peak Messi. So I think he did exactly what he should have done, what we needed him to do in tough conditions. But we also benefited from, I think it was 5 of their shots were right at him. Right. So, they didn't go in top shelf. They didn't pull an Adeyemi and put the ball in the downward corner from 17, 18 yards or 19 yards on the wet grass. So for the most part, just by happenstance, their finishing was generally routine saves that he was asked to do, and he did them. And that's huge. Like we can't. That's the first step, right? And then hopefully he'll when called upon to make some world class type of saves that are possible. Like Dortmund, I was not critical on him except maybe one where theoretically could have been a world-class kind of save. The rest of them were like, almost no one stopping.
I would agree. Yeah, I didn't really hold them. Some people were pretty critical, and I thought it was a bit unfair with the type of efforts coming in, including deflections and penalty kicks and all these sorts of.
Yeah, so I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful because again, we haven't seen this. He hasn't been called on situationally yet to put on a Fraser Forster type of performance against Lazio, for example. So I still am confident that he has that in him. He just hasn't been called on to do it yet, and he's been rock solid until we wait for that point, whenever that may arrive, and hopefully it doesn't arrive, because that usually means we're getting, bombarded with good chances from the opposition. But so yeah, I'm still relatively confident in him.
Excellent. And you want to save the poetry until Alan returns next week, you reckon? Something special?
It feels wrong, and I was prepared. So, I listen to a lot of history podcasts, and I've been listening to some history on Sudan in that area, which now Sudan, South Sudan. And they got into the Zanj Rebellion. It was a slave rebellion. So I'm going to get into that next time we have Poetry Corner, because it's how gingers ended up in the Middle East. It's one of the wildest stories. Based off of your proclivity towards gingers and Liam Scales' ascension and the brand that we're building, I thought, what better than a 9th century slave revolt in the Abbasid Empire to get into talking about gingers in the Middle East. So we'll do that next week.
Well, for the wailing and gnashing of teeth that I've got no doubt will be heard when it becomes obvious that Alan's not on this show. You've just pulled a rabbit out of the hat there, James. So
viewership's going to collapse.
They'll be queuing up for next week.
There'll be a lot of tuning in and then tuning out immediately when Alan's not here. So,
for those of you who have stayed with us, thanks so much. And just a reminder, of course, that you can join us this time next week, and we'll also have the Tuesday show with Alan and James and Laura there. And we're now going to go over to our Motherwell analyst as well just now. So I hope you enjoy that. So, as usual, after our Champions League matches, we tend to be away from home. That's the supercomputer for you folks. Another tough match, I would suggest, given last season where we, in both matches, with Matt O'Reilly, God bless him, scoring, and I think about the 97th minute at Fir Park. And Adam Ida scored twice, 94th and 96th minute at Fir Park to get 2 hard-earned victories. So with that in mind, going back to Fir Park, I'm delighted to welcome Greg, who's joining us. He's a Motherwell fan and a data enthusiast. Hello, Greg, and a warm welcome to the Huddle Breakdown Extra Time.
Hi there, how you doing, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much. Greg, would you like to say a little bit about yourself? I know that many of our listeners and viewers do like to visit similar sites and so forth. So if you'd like to say something about your output and where we might find it.
Yeah, sure. So I probably don't post as much as I used to anymore, but I still post the odd nonsense on Twitter. You find me at Greg the Well fan, and yeah, outside of tweeting rubbish, I do a bit of work for Ayr United and kind of data analysis side of things.
Wow, this is somebody who knows what he's talking about, James, somebody involved in the game, so need to be on our toes. With that in mind, I'll ask you a very generic question, Greg. It was really about Motherwell's start to the season, as I'm sure James will touch on a little bit later. I think one of the more interesting teams to look at and analyse this season. How would you rate the start to the season that Motherwell have had?
Yeah, it's been, I would say, more positive than negative. I think I'll probably touch on it multiple times throughout the course of this chat, but considering the amount of injuries that we've had, I kind of expected us to get off to a slower start than we have. But we really do seem to have, kind of weathered that storm in that sense and have had plenty of positive results. We've maybe not, been blown teams out of the water, etc. We've maybe rode our luck at times. We've kind of managed games well rather than, as I said, outperforming teams. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how we're going, and quite happy with a lot of the recruitment that we saw in the summer as well.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a couple of really interesting points there in terms of recruitment and injuries. I know that McGinn's injured and could be for some time, and of course the first match played where he was missing after the international break was a 1-0 defeat at home to Dundee. Do you feel that you'll miss the experience of McGinn big time against Celtic, or who do you think might slot in?
Yeah, I think he's probably one that goes under the radar slightly to fans of other teams, but I really think he'll be a huge miss. And he plays that right side of the back three, and he's your perfect outside centre half in a back three for me. He's got a wee bit of everything. Defensively is solid. He's maybe not unbelievable in the air, but he can step in. I think he's kind of passing forward is really underrated as well. And to be honest, we've not really got a like-for-like replacement in there. Kind of the guys who would be looking to step in to replace him are probably more kind of traditional centre halves, and possibly not as comfortable defending the wide areas as well. We saw Kofi Balmer coming in against Dundee there last weekend. He kind of played on the left hand side of the back three, and Dan Casey slid over to the right. And as much as he's got a kind of NFL standard long throw, yeah, he's got kind of other detriments to his game as well. So yeah, I think McGinn will be really kind of tough to replace, especially for the game on Sunday.
And just to kind of touch on that a little bit, actually, and probe a little bit more deeply there, and notice with Kettlewell and Friel, they're quite happy. Okay, they've got their favoured tactical setup, but they have tried many throughout the season. And I think the one occasion that you played 5 at the back was against the Rangers at Hampden. Do you think that may be the road that Kettlewell goes down this time, maybe moving Stephen O'Donnell that bit further back to make up for McGinn's absence?
Yeah, potentially. I think, yeah, we do tend to go with the kind of the three centre halves most weeks, and also the wing backs three that are more advanced or kind of more pragmatic in their starting positions, depending on the opponents. I think you're right. O'Donnell is possibly one who could go and play the right side of the back three, and he has on occasion, but I think that was more necessity rather than a kind of conscious choice from the management team. I think we've not really seen our new Australian right back, Johnny Katrumbis. We've not seen any of him so far due to injury, and I'm led to believe he's kind of similar mould in terms of he's not going to be, particularly good 1v1 attacking. He's not going to go past people. He's more one who'll kind of pass forward and probably suits our approach quite well. So Yeah, I think O'Donnell's a possibility. I do think that we'll stick with that kind of back three, back five, however you want to look at it, against Celtic at the weekend. And I think the main thing that I think we'll see is, I would really imagine, is to lose one of the strikers who started against Dundee, 100%. I think it didn't really work, to be honest, against Dundee, and I definitely don't think Kettlewell will go for that on Sunday against yourselves. I don't think it will be a four central midfielders, kind of like the box thing that he's done in the past, just because we don't have any others because they're all injured.
That's interesting,
Yeah, so I can see maybe one of the two wingers who seem to come off the bench, Maswan Hisse or Jair Tavares from Hibs, possibly playing as a kind of almost like a bit of a free roaming role, just hoping to carry the ball forward and kind of pick up scraps, give us a wee bit of a threat on the counter attack, or possibly Tony Watt coming in and playing just off the striker. But it will be interesting because, as I said a few times already, we are slightly limited with our injuries.
Do you think he'll play Robinson up front? He seems to have kind of favoured him big time, because I think the Greek centre forward that you signed has been injured quite a bit. I think was it started 3 games, scored once, but looks a decent player, but a bit injury prone.
Yeah, I think so. It was a bit of a strange one. He changed both strikers at half time against Dundee. Now, they weren't doing brilliantly, to be fair, but I think possibly Stamatolopoulos had some kind of illness. Yeah, you're shaking your head there. I know, I've been practicing.
No, I just said the Greek guy, so...
Holy crap. What a linguist.
I know. But yeah, I mean... I can see him starting Robinson. To be honest, I hope he doesn't, because I've not been too impressed, and I don't think as a lone striker either he's kind of got the right skill set for that. But yeah, we'll see. I would like to see Stamatolopoulos play.
Well, I would like to see Robinson, but I hope your friend plays so that we can talk about him a lot more. I love your pronunciation. James, over to you, please.
Yeah, I'd like to see myself try to pronounce that, because
absolutely. He's a better man than I.
I'll echo Martin and say thank you for joining us, Greg. Really appreciate it, and also thank you to Air for letting you do it. It's to have someone actually working at a club join a couple of morons like Martin and I is some risky business for them to take. So thanks for all involved to let you. And have you join us.
More eliminator, but I can't lie.
So yeah, I mean, looking at the recruitment and everything the last few years, I mean, Motherwell's just, I think, been one of the better run clubs in football operations. I mean, as a stat nerd and an analytics nerd, I look for people that are smart, optimizing, trying to do interesting things. And when I see a relatively lower resource club in Scotland have a squad of a bunch of names that an idiot like me can't pronounce their last names, to that in and of itself is interesting. And but I want to direct it more towards, when we DM'd on this when we were setting this up, the thing that stands out to me with Motherwell this season, other than Lenton Miller, which we'll talk about, is set pieces. And I haven't watched enough of you guys yet to have the eye test, as they say. But when I look at the data profile of what Motherwell are doing on set pieces, it's outrageous. And I mean that in a complimentary way. And you talked about long throws, but I'll just throw one number out at you. So they're Motherwell's average, generally speaking, they're having and conceding roughly the same amount of set pieces, whether they're corners, direct free kicks, that kind of thing. But their average XG per chance off of set pieces is like 50% higher than what they're conceding, and at levels that I would be happy if Celtic got on average all the time. I mean, off corners, Motherwell's averaging 0.14 XG per chance, which is nuts. So what the hell is going on, Greg? How are they doing this? What kind of sorcery are they exercising in order to generate these chances?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one, and one that I've kind of been moaning to people for the last few seasons about. I mean, why are we not kind of utilising set pieces more, because we did go for that back three. You naturally have an extra centre half in there who should be good in the air, should be a good target. And we've always had kind of players with good delivery. Looking at Blair Spittle last year as well, he was, excellent kind of set piece taker. But yeah, I think we've probably had a little bit more kind of creativity with them. Is one thing. So the goal against Hibs, Lennon Miller, it was kind of free kick. Most teams for me would have stuck that in the box, try and win the first contact. Quick free kick, slid it around the other side of the wall, and Stamatopoulos had his kind of shot at goal, and we scored from it. So I think they are kind of thinking outside of the box slightly in terms of kind of more generic, I say, kind of putting the ball in the box, trying to score from headers, etc. I think we saw in the League Cup, we scored a couple from corners, and both of them were really obvious, kind of blocking blocking a defender to let one of our strongest players in the air go and attack the ball freely. And that has been a theme that we've seen, maybe not working quite as well as it did in the League Cup against the kind of lower league teams, but something that they are obviously trying to do. And then, just as you touched on, I think one of the big pluses from that has been Lennon Miller and his delivery as well. It really is excellent. He kind of has got a bit of variety about it as well. He can kind of whip it with pace in the near post for free kicks from deeper. He can kind of float them in to an area where it's better to be headed back across goal. And yeah, as we also talked about Kofi Balmer, there seems to be, we've only really seen him in the last couple of games, but his long throw is a bit of a super strength, as I call it. It's not just a throw in that can reach the box. He can actually deliver it with pace. He could deliver it front post, back post. So it does leave teams guessing a little bit as well.
So if I could follow up on that, so are they? So could some more analytically inclined, smarter clubs that are focusing on optimizing set pieces are turning everything into a set piece they can. So, it's within any distance where they can play high balls, even if it's well in their own half, they'll shell them forward and, try to win second balls or even get it into the box. And, a couple of the people I've talked to over the last few years that have worked at clubs, I've asked, why aren't you taking a page out of like the NBA with inbounds plays and seeing more sophisticated, structured plays on set pieces? So are you seeing some evidence of that where they're, shelling from all? Are they turning every throw in their own half into a long throw into the box, or are they being a little bit more calibrated in when they deploy it?
I think kind of personnel based for the throw-ins in particular. I think with Balmer, it really is. He has the length in his throw to get you, I don't even know, 35 yards up the pitch, no problem. So 100%, if we have a throw-in kind of in our own corner, then he'll throw it up the line, try and gain some ground, gain some territory from that. Otherwise, if he's got one in the final third, exactly where that's going. So yeah, no, we definitely kind of are looking to get up the pitch as far as we can, and I don't think that's a bad idea. The one thing that I have noticed is, from the two games that we've had Balmer playing, and that we scored from directly from the long throw against Hibs, but we have been kind of left short on the counter slightly, which I think is naturally going to happen now and again, but I think we do need to wisen up slightly from that. There was a couple of instances against Dundee. Obviously, I would say the majority of the time the defending team is going to win the first contact from a long throw, just with the nature of how the ball's delivered. It's quite kind of floaty naturally compared to a cross, but yeah, we need to be kind of more aware in how to stop the counter attack. In terms of kind of trying to generate as many set piece opportunities as possible. I think your kind of numbers that you talked about there, where we've had roughly the same amount of set pieces for and against, considering that we've been low in possession numbers, we're quite low in kind of final third entries. For anyway, that we must be. It's not something I think I consciously notice when I'm watching the games, but there must be kind of some extent of that. I would say that we do have a few players who seem good at winning fouls as well. So Lennon Miller is one. I think he's really clever with the way he uses his body. He knows he's not the strongest, and kind of takes contact and is happy to go down. But yeah, I think there must be something in it. It's not something I notice on a kind of week to week basis, if I'm being honest, though.
Well, let's get into the wonder kid then, because that's, I mean, let's be honest. No one wants to hear about you, me, or Martin here. They want to hear about,
listen, my mother watches this, James.
God bless her then. Boy, geez, she must love you.
Well, she really does.
Oh, good to hear that. So yeah, just wax poetic. What is it like watching him? For those that aren't watching him every week, what is it that makes him special, and how much are you enjoying the experience of watching a wonder kid every week?
Yeah, no, he really is a special player, and I think he's a player who I think will translate well to playing at a higher level as well, and playing in a more possession-based team. We've had, definitely not to the same extent, but guys like Alan Campbell coming through the academy who, have been capped for Scotland, etc. But, he very much suited our kind of dogged style at the time, and kind of flourished in that sense. Whereas I think Lennon Miller could play in a variety of systems and a variety of kind of leagues as well. He, as most people say, he's just like a seasoned pro with how he carries himself in terms of decisions he makes, in terms of, as I said, things like using his body, whereas you see some younger players being a wee bit naive. I think he's the complete opposite, and to be honest, if nobody told you and you didn't know who he was, and you were just watching a game for the first time, you would think he'd been kind of around the block a lot more. I also think he has shown slight versatility in the way he plays as well. So I personally think he's kind of better as a deeper role, taking the ball off the back three for us, it would be, and kind of looking to play forward in that sense. But due to kind of injuries that we've had, he has been playing further forward. Is kind of one of the 2 10s behind a striker, and I mean, I still don't think it's his best position, but you can see from his kind of underlying numbers, his XG, his XG assisted, and his just goals and assists. Genuinely, I know some of that's inflated from set pieces, but he is effective in the final third and getting into the box. He scored a few goals arriving late, and yeah, I just think he's a really, really special talent who won't be hanging around for long, but that's fine by me because we're going to earn a fortune.
As far as I know, I believe that he was at Colton S High, and was the same PE teacher that kind of coached Davy Turnbull, and he was, obviously we saw the money that Turnbull went for, and he thinks that there's so much more, at the same age to come from Lennon Miller as well. He just thought he was outstanding. And, of course, he scored goal of the season in Scotland. Was it when 2021 for the Scotland under-16s versus England? James, yeah. I don't know if you ever saw that, but he gets the ball in his own heart. It's just from a kickoff, and he just shoots, shoots and scores, as they say in that basketball game I believe you watch. And just a prodigious talent. And I believe he was only 14 years old when he was playing for the under-16s at that time. He was also Motherwell's youngest ever player. And Greg, I believe, and do correct me if I'm wrong, just turned 16 when he made his debut. And you kind of touched on a point that I was going to ask you about, because his versatility really came across, and his maturity. Almost have to pinch yourself to believe this kid's just turned 18. Playing these variety of midfield roles. As you say, because of the injuries, he's been playing in a more forward position and doing pretty well. He's joint top goal scorer with 4 goals. Creative, he's winning you the free kicks in that forward position, as you mentioned earlier. But one game that kind of stood out for me when I was watching Motherwell was the game at Pittodrie, where Motherwell lost 2-1, but were very close to coming back to 2-2. And the game seemed to change when Lennon Miller got moved back that little bit. He was able to carry the ball, his range of passing. In short, I suppose he dictated the pace of the game. All being equal, where would you see him playing A against Celtic and B in an ideal world for Motherwell?
I think he probably will be maybe slightly more, kind of slightly deeper with his starting position. I think we might go for a kind of flatter midfield three with one playing behind a striker. So possibly not quite as advanced as he has been. But yeah, as I say, I do think he is more suited, and in a more possession-based team, he would be kind of at his best in a deeper role. I don't want to be, so I always find myself loving number sixes who get on the ball and keep things ticking, etc. Kind of like your Callum McGregors or like your Billy Gilmores. But I think Lennon Miller has a bit extra to his game that he can contribute in the final third, so I'm conscious of not wanting to kind of stagnate that. However, I do think that a wee bit deeper from what he currently is where he'll kind of end up playing in years to come.
Okay, James.
Yeah, I was going to say my last question, and then we'll let you go here out of respect for your time. Important people like you, we can't take too much of your time up. So along with smart recruitment, looks like your new goalkeeper. He's new this season, right? So again, Theo Bair comes in, he's gone, replaced with new strikers. I mean, it's being very smartly done, and this guy seems like he's on the ball, and that's what always, as a Celtic supporter, that's one of the things I'm always afraid of, is good keepers on well-coached teams that are going to be organized and defensive, and the keeper might stand on their head. So what's been your impression so far? Again, the data profile looks pretty good. How would you characterize his play so far?
Yeah, so I think coming into this season, fans were quite kind of apprehensive about the goalkeeper situation. We'd had Liam Kelly for the past however many years, and okay, he started well, but I've never seen a player drop off quite like he did. As bad as it kind of sounds, he really did cost us multiple points last season, and his data was pretty horrendous, if I'm being brutally honest. Oxborough had been Kelly's understudy for 2 years, or maybe 18 months. Hadn't had a sniff. I'd always heard good things from people at the club about, he looks good, etc. But Liam Kelly's captain and one of the top earners. He's not going to in Scotland squads even. He's not going to be kind of put to one side. So I think we signed Christian Heggie from West Ham on loan. I personally think he was signed this summer to be number one, and Oxborough was going to stay understudy. But Oxborough has been fantastic. He's, what I like in a keeper is a big physical presence who can take crosses, but also has the agility for being a good shot stopper as well. As you touched on there, James, his data profile is fantastic. I think only himself and the keepers from the top three teams, Celtic, Rangers and Aberdeen, well, not in that order, sorry, but they're the only ones with kind of positive prevented goals at the minute. And yeah, Oxford really is standing out. As I said, kind of later on in games, I think he's also instrumental when we are kind of sitting back slightly, soaking up pressure. He'll come and take crosses and relieve that pressure for us. So yeah, been absolutely over the moon with how he's performed, and he's just recently signed a new long-term contract, which I think has the option to extend to 2028, which is unheard of for kind of a club of our size. We tend to give out 2-year deals at the max. So Kettlewell clearly really trusts him as well.
Yeah, the boy Wilson, kind of left wing back. I think he's on a similar sort of contract. He had a bit of a kind of checkered past and has really come on, I think, this season. I think he's a Scotland under-21 international as well, doing tremendously well. Another member of this Motherwell Academy.
Yeah, no, Ewan Wilson is one that I actually played a part in signing for Stirling Albion last season on loan. We were really happy to get him in. He'd kind of had a spell at Albion Rovers and was kind of on the fringes of being in the Motherwell first team squad last summer. It didn't quite make the cut after all the signings had kind of come in. So we took him to Stirling Albion, and to be honest, he was in and out of the team. He had some flaws in his game, especially defensively. And I'm sure he'd say that himself. He's gone away to Beath Juniors on loan. He could only go to junior club because he'd played for Motherwell and Stirling that season, so had to go to a club without the top four divisions, and had a great spell. Has come back. The one thing that really stands out for me is his athleticism for his age. He really is mature. He's defensively solid. I never think he's going to be one who I'm quite big on kind of, if you're playing wing back, you need to be good 1v1 going forward. You really do. I think he's possibly more of a like a Chris Cadden style that we had in previous years. Powerful runner, good at attacking space when it's there. In tight areas, maybe isn't going to be up to that. But it's really positive to see another academy product coming through, and also getting the backing to actually have a run in the team. We signed another left back this season, Steve said, and who's not really had a kick. Kettlewell could have given Wilson a few games and then taken him out and whatever. But I think he's actually played the most minutes apart from Oxford in the league this season. So really positive start for him.
Yeah, I think it's one of these good news stories. We were talking about Liam Scales in that sense, and from the Motherwell point of view, it's always good to see academy boys coming through. Very much looking forward to going down to the game on Sunday, actually. It's always a good game at Fir Park, and I'd like to take this opportunity yet again, Greg, to thank you so much for coming on. As I've said previously in previous episodes, it's a big deal coming on a show which is devoted to another club, so thanks ever so much for that, and I look forward to meeting your club in the League Cup final in the future. I hope you're all twisting and shouting in a few weeks after playing the Rangers.
Yeah, me too, guys. No, thanks very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Greg.
Take care, Greg. Bye-bye.